Welcome one and all to another edition of Let's Talk About, hosted by yours truly, Zach Keilman. As today we bring you another edition of our NFL playoff series for 2019 with a recap of the NFL Divisional Round matches. Now, if you didn't catch us last week, we did a NFL wildcard recap on this podcast channel, and you can catch that episode if you like, if you want to listen to it before you listen to this edition. Otherwise, welcome in. You'll get a recap of all four of the divisional round games from this past weekend, which that would be January 11th and 12th of 2019. You will also get a bit of my personal take on the retirement of Luke Kuechly, which was quite a blockbuster announcement coming out of the NFL this week. Part of the reason why I actually delayed the podcast, because when I found that announcement out, I said, ooh, wait, maybe we should probably talk about this as well. I mean, this is the NFL playoff edition, but NFL news also of this magnitude should be covered. And also, the NFL Hall of Fame class for 2020 was announced, and I want to touch on one in particular Hall of Famer that really did convince me, or really was an influential part of me doing stuff just like this. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the first game of the divisional round saw the Minnesota Vikings traveling to Santa Clara, California to visit the San Francisco 49ers. And let me tell you, this game, from a tale of two halves perspective, really was quite that story. At least if we're talking stats and also tone. First half of the game ended 10-14 in favor of the 49ers. It kind of had the vibe that the Minnesota Vikings were more of a realistic competitor than it was looking on paper originally going into this game, because personally I felt that the Saints slept on the Minnesota Vikings in the wild card round, and I was definitely under the belief that the 49ers would not do the same. And first half, especially after Jimmy Garoppolo was picked off with the remaining 1 minute and 46 seconds in the half, I was beginning to believe that the Minnesota Vikings actually might have a shot at this. They scored a field goal to end the half to bring themselves within 4, and their defense, for the most part, except for 2 touchdown drives, was holding their own. So I had a good belief that Minnesota had a shot at this game. And then the second half happened, in which, well, everything fell apart. The best way I could describe this is if, say, you had a top 5 Ohio State team taking on a unranked Ohio University MAC squad. The first half may look competitive, and you might, for example, think that maybe, just maybe, the unranked Ohio University squad is going to take out that Ohio State team. And then the second half proves to you why the top 5 ranked team is top 5 ranked in the nation. So San Francisco basically played the role of Ohio State in this scenario. They buried Minnesota in the second half. Their run game was dominant all afternoon, tallying well over 100 yards. Tevin Coleman alone was a beast. 22 carries, 105 yards, 4.8 per touch with 2 touchdowns of his own. Meanwhile, remember, you still have Raheem Mostert and Matt Breida on that team, and it's a stout running core. This is why this team was second in the league in rushing this year. It's an impressive rushing core that they built up in San Francisco, and Tevin Coleman in particular has lived up to the contract since he's come off injury. He's been a pretty special player. All 3 of them have really contributed very well. In this game, they were the main X factor. Jimmy Garoppolo delivered when he needed to. He wasn't asked to do too much. He converted key throws, played actually kind of a Ryan Tannehill type of player, which we'll get into that later, by the way, same day, and just did what he needed to. Now, for looking forward, they are going to play Green Bay, which I will touch on that game, and you have to ask yourselves, do they have what it takes to take on Green Bay? Well, that's where the defense comes in, because San Francisco definitely has enough offensive firepower, but their defense, that is the X factor that sets them apart compared to pretty much every other remaining opponent in the NFL playoffs this season, even the AFC. I mean, don't get me wrong, Tennessee's imposed their will at times. Kansas City has upgraded their defense astronomically compared to last year somehow, but San Francisco's is the X factor. If there is a team that's going to the Super Bowl in the NFC, it's going to be them. I think For them, I will have to say that they have to just protect and really limit one player on Green Bay, and that's Davante Adams. Personally, if you lock down Davante Adams, I really don't know who you can trust. Aaron Jones is a good running back, but here's the deal. Dalvin Cook, who, by the way, was one of the best rushers in the NFL this past season for the Minnesota Vikings. He was held to 9 carries on 18 yards, 2 yards a carry. And I think Dalvin Cook's better than Aaron Jones. So you tell me how Aaron Jones is going to have a bigger impact. Because personally, I'm curious to see how that plays out. And I don't see it happening with Green Bay. Obviously, I'll give some keys to how Green Bay can pull this off. But, Aaron Rodgers is still a special player. But if we're comparing Seattle and San Francisco, Seattle, I'm surprised they got as far as they did. They are definitely a team that is more of a clinging team. Again, I'll talk more in depth on that later. But for San Francisco, this is a well-rounded team. We saw that when they took on Minnesota. San Francisco also has home field advantage, which we saw that their team, when successful, can bring out fans in droves. They brought a record number of attendees to this game, 73,000 for an NFL game. That's still pretty impressive in this era. I know it's not college numbers, but still, 73,000 for a NFL game in Santa Clara, California. That's some good numbers. And I would expect no less with this game coming up this coming Sunday when the Green Bay Packers come into town. The most surprising playoff game of the 2019 NFL playoffs had to be the Tennessee Titans taking on the Baltimore Ravens. No one saw this coming. And there were some people, myself, that kind of had a feeling that maybe the New England Patriots would take the loss against the Tennessee Titans. This was a team coming in with, again, the most momentum out of all the playoff teams. They had been capitalizing on a mid-season change, and even though they were 9-7, they still looked like they could be the most destructive or dark horse candidate coming in as a number 6 seed. And they did what they needed to against New England Patriots. And when we looked at Baltimore coming up, most of us thought, man, Baltimore is a de facto number 1 choice to go to the Super Bowl in the AFC, at least for a lot of people, including myself. I didn't see Tennessee really standing a chance in this game. I thought that maybe if they could capitalize much more on their run game than Baltimore could, that they'd stand a chance. But Baltimore's offense was and in my opinion still is such a dominant powerhouse that I just didn't see this happening. And what I didn't account for at the time was the opportunistic nature that the Tennessee Titans have as a team. This game obviously shows that in that instance. The Titans were opportunistic to the max. I mean, if you look at the stat sheet for this game, just yardage alone, the Ravens, you would say, won easily. They should have won by 2 scores, it looks like. I mean, Lamar Jackson threw for 365 yards for crying out loud. He also ran for 143. He had over 500 combined yards by himself. That should be a win, right? Until you tell people that they basically got routed 28-12 at their own home stadium. And then you ask yourself, how does this happen? Well, turnovers obviously play a big role, and so do those 4th down stops. Now, one of the key moments in this game comes at the 10-minute mark in the 3rd quarter, where the Baltimore Ravens are trailing 14-6 against the Tennessee Titans. They're driving. They're at the Tennessee 18-yard line. It's 4th down and 1. Now, you have 2 things you can do here. You can, A, go for it on 4th down and 1 and be aggressive here, try and get back within 1 point or tie the game with a 2-point conversion, or you bite the bullet, use the most accurate kicker in NFL history that you have on your roster to score what should be a pretty relatively easy kick for him, make the score 14-9, shove the Titans back deep into their own territory on the kickoff, and stop them at their own game. Problem is, they didn't capitalize. Lamar Jackson and company go for it on 4th down. They lose on the 4th down conversion, mainly because Lamar didn't follow his blocks from what it looks like, and the Titans just did a perfect job corralling him to the center of the line, and they get the ball back. And I'm kidding you not, maybe a few plays later, 2 or 3 plays later, we see Derrick Henry scamper for a 60-plus yard run that brings the Titans down to the Ravens' 4-yard line, which then, 2 plays later after that on a 3rd and goal, we get what I would consider one of the coolest trick plays I have seen in some time. That's reminiscent to another said trick play Kansas City pulled 2 or 3 years ago against the Denver Broncos, where Derrick Henry lines up in Wildcat. Ryan Tannehill's not on the field. Instead, we have Marcus Mariota lining up wide right as a receiver. And we see Henry take the direct snap, look like he's going to run. Instead, stalls a little bit in the backfield, jump passes it to Corey Davis in the back of the end zone for a touchdown, making this game 21-6 in a span of less than 10 plays. And the best part is, you also have 3+ minutes run off the clock at this point, so Tennessee's killing clock and gaining the lead. But it gets even better, because the next possession, Baltimore gets the ball back. Only problem is that Lamar Jackson is strip sacked by Darrell Casey, in which then we have just a few plays later, Ryan Tannehill taking the ball himself on a 3rd and goal at the Baltimore Ravens 1-yard line and scoring himself. It's a 28-6 game at this point, 4 minutes left in the 3rd quarter. There's plenty of time for Baltimore, but the Titans have basically started making this a rout. And off of just a few plays. I mean, this team is very opportunistic. It capitalizes when it needs to. And this is the type of team that I feel the football gods are just wanting them to win right now. I called them on Twitter, this is the team America deserves, because everyone loves a good underdog story. Everyone loves a down-and-out team turning things around for the better. I mean, if you're an AFC South opponent, maybe you don't care, but as a person myself that's a general football fan, this is a story I love. And in my heart, I'm rooting for the Titans. I want these guys to win. I love the fact that Ryan Tannehill has basically turned his career around with Tennessee and is starting to make a name for himself. Credit that he didn't even throw for 100 yards in both of his previous playoff games right now. He's thrown for less than 100 yards in each of the previous games, which is insane. But when you have the likes of Derrick Henry running for 185-plus yards in the 2 playoff games that have gone on so far for the Titans, you don't really need him to do much. He's thrown a touchdown in each game, so he's made critical plays when he's needed to. And he's also run in a touchdown now at this point. I mean, Ryan Tannehill has become one of the faces of the Titans because of his grit and determination. And it's part of what's making this team pretty special, along with the fact that it's just an opportunistic squad that is the underdog. It is the true underdog mentality that I love to see in the NFL, and I wish the best. Do I think they have a shot against the Kansas City Chiefs? I'm going to say it like I have the last 2 weeks. No, I don't think they do. And if the luck's going to run out, it's probably going to be running out against Kansas City. The way that they demolished Houston, which I will describe next, makes me believe that Tennessee does not have it in them. They did beat them earlier in the year, but that was at Nissan Stadium. They had home crowd behind them, and it took a miracle final drive with a Ryan Tannehill touchdown pass to win that game. It's going to take a lot more, I think, to stop Kansas City this go-around, especially now that this roster is fully healthy, and it's ready to go, and it's ready to, I would say, finally get over the hump now that they don't have the Patriots standing in their way. But for the Tennessee Titans, even if they don't get to the Super Bowl this year, this is a roster that's got a lot of special talent on it, and I think can capitalize and build something going into 2020. Because they really have found something, I think, in Ryan Tannehill. Derrick Henry, they realize, is not just a second option anymore. He is a de facto superstar in this league. And they have recognized that they need to treat him as such. Now, the first game on the Sunday slate would be the Texans taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And if you turned off the television after the first quarter and some change, be understandable. I mean, the Texans were up 24-0 at one point in this game. And if you didn't hear me right, that is correct. They were up 24-0 early on in the second quarter. At the 10:54 mark, after they had just scored a field goal deep in Kansas City territory, was the last time that you will see Houston have any relevance to dominating this game. It would start off with a fantastic return, coupled then by a dominant performance by Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Kelce had 131 yards by himself with 3 touchdowns. Mahomes would throw for overall 5 touchdowns for 321 yards passing. And Deshaun Watson, to start the day, had a pretty solid start himself. I mean, considering that he did throw for a 50-plus yard touchdown bomb to Kenny Stills to kick things off, it looked like this would be a very high-scoring game, which it was for Kansas City at least. The final score was 51-31, but when you consider that the Texans scored 24 in a span of 20 minutes in game time, it's amazing how well the Kansas City Chiefs responded. And really, Romeo Crennel and Bill O'Brien had no answer for the Chiefs after they started getting in gear. I mean, the Chiefs really acted like a stalled car for the majority of that first quarter. And they just never looked back. I mean, Kansas City gave the Texans fits, and Houston had no answer all game. Patrick Mahomes looks like he is now completely healthy and is ready to go for his first appearance in the Super Bowl. They are still my pick now, at least, as the Super Bowl favorite. I did have them over Baltimore if Baltimore was to have moved on against Tennessee, but I still have them over the Titans. And the main reason why, this team is definitely well-balanced. They are a very well-balanced squad offensively and now defensively. I mean, Frank Clark and Tyrann Mathieu are really starting to anchor this unit to be a considerable force. I mean, the back half of the season, they were ranking top 10 in many statistical categories defensively, so you can't take these guys for granted anymore. They are a legit unit, and you have to respect them that way. Now, will they be able to stop Derrick Henry? That is the key piece to the puzzle, because if you can stop Henry, odds are you're going to force Ryan Tannehill to win the game. And Tannehill is capable of scoring when he needs to, but he's not a dynamic passer in the sense of Mahomes, Watson, or others in this area of the playoffs. And I'm going to have to say, if you can stop Derrick Henry, you can beat the Tennessee Titans. I'm just going to be honest. And KC right now has the more explosive offense. I think that they won't make as many mistakes this time around. Now that they have 1 week to prepare and they know what the Titans are capable of, they won't take them for granted, which is why earlier in the week I projected they're going to win 31-24. I still see them doing that. And the performance against the Texans convinced me that they are definitely, in my opinion, the AFC champions going into the Super Bowl. Now, the final game on the Sunday slate, and also the one I think that was the most thrilling, would be Seattle taking on the Green Bay Packers, the final piece of the puzzle for the championship games come this weekend. And it was definitely the best for many reasons. One, and mainly the one thing, was that you had 2 of the best quarterbacks of all time taking on each other. Russell Wilson has definitely established himself as arguably the best Seattle quarterback in their history. Meanwhile, on the opposing side, the home team of Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers obviously has Aaron Rodgers, who has a good argument for himself to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history too. So we have 2 great quarterbacks facing off. We have some excellent receiving talent. The question is, which defense could hold up the best and for the final seconds? Because here's the thing with Seattle. All year, Seattle has been able to hang in with teams till the final buzzer. Even if it looks like it's inevitable, they always find a way to claw themselves back. And this was just the case as well in Green Bay. And they almost had it too. Green Bay would maintain possession for their final drive deep in their own territory, and Aaron Rodgers would do his thing, delivering on clutch throw after clutch throw after clutch throw to end the game. One to Devontae Adams, and another specifically to Jimmy Graham, which, by the way, if you listen to my last podcast on the wild card, one of my projections for the divisional round was that this game was going to have at least one controversial call that everyone was going to be talking about at the end. And actually got 2 of them, one that was mostly ignored because the other one got so much discussion. The first one would be a Seattle fumble early in the first quarter at around the 10-minute mark. Green Bay looked like they definitely recovered the ball. The NFL said otherwise. Go figure. The NFL officiating is terrible. They need to figure it out. They obviously will in the back end of the season, going into the off season. Meanwhile, The one that made the most talk online, and one that I had a lot of fun talking to NFL fans about, was the third down and long conversion to Jimmy Graham, where if you look at multiple angles of the shot, some of them look like that he converted on third down. Others look like he was short. You have talk about that the yellow line wasn't representing the actual first down marker, and it was a mess. Look, honestly, looking at this at multiple angles, even after I first reacted to the play and then looking at it a day or so later, it's a tough call. This one really, I think, left to a judgment, and the only reason I'm saying is because there are two different angles that say otherwise. Many of the side that say he converted the play use an angle that very much skews where the marker's at, and, it does look like first down. But there's another one that I've seen many parts that looks like it's almost directly on the first down marker. You could argue that he's maybe short. We'll never know. It was reviewed multiple times by officials. They say that there was no conclusive evidence. Game's over after a few knee downs, and away Green Bay goes to take on San Francisco. Now, at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned that San Francisco is a more versatile team, and that to me, they have to shut down one player. And this was a guy that Seattle just couldn't find an answer for. And I don't understand how this is the case. But Davante Adams is the one player, if you ask me, that needs to be shut down the most. I mean, he had 160 yards against Seattle. He was a dominant force. There was no answer for him most of the day. And he also converted one of the crucial 2 third down plays on that final drive because he was one-on-one covered. If you ask me, if I am San Francisco, if I am Kyle Shanahan, I am shutting down Davante Adams. And here is why. Because for the majority of the season, and yes, Davante was out for 4 games, that's understandable. But for the majority of the season, if Rodgers is under pressure and you don't have your guy in Davante Adams wide open, or if you can't rely on Aaron Jones to get any rushing yards, who are you going to throw it to? Jimmy Graham's not the same person that he is. And yes, he was open during their contest against Seattle. I understand that. But he's not the same player, and Seattle also is a banged-up team. The fact that they even made it a 5-point game at that point, I had to applaud them for. And I applaud Green Bay. They deserve the win. They fought it out. They gritted out the win. Good job for them. But this team I don't believe in, and it's just that, honestly, if you just shut down one of these opponents to this offense seems very limited. It's the same offense that would have been last year's offense without Davante Adams, because Geronimo Allison is only for situational plays. Marquise Valdez-Scantling, only for situational plays, if you ask me. Allen Lazard is the one I think that'd be the wild card that may be able to fill a larger role because he's proven that over the season. That's fine. Aaron Jones, definitely versatile, but if he and Jimmy Graham are your only weapons, and yes, Aaron Jones is a versatile weapon, but if he and Jimmy Graham are your only 2 weapons against arguably one of, if not the best defense in the NFL, like they were several weeks ago in November, I just don't see it. I really do not see it. I mean, if Green Bay wins, great. That's fine. I can't argue against it. They proved me wrong, but this is a case where I truly have to say, dude, prove me wrong, because I do not see it. And I don't get why defensive coordinators keep leaving Davante Adams in these scenarios. I mean, it must be that he's getting schemed better on the offensive side, because if I'm a defensive coordinator, my best corner and maybe someone else is going to be lining up and watching over Davante Adams, because I don't want the guy getting the ball. Simple as that. He should not be getting the ball. And if he doesn't get the ball, I do not see, unless Rodgers pulls out much more of his youthful side that he hasn't really shown as much this year, I do not see how they are going to beat San Francisco. Maybe I'm proven wrong. That's why I'm saying this. But right now, I am going to stick by my prediction I had on Facebook that Green Bay will not pull this contest out in Santa Clara. It's going to be a San Francisco win 38-24, which will then result in a San Francisco and Kansas City matchup in the Super Bowl, which I will make projections on those, of course, when that happens. Until then, that's what I'm thinking. Again, I don't think Green Bay is incapable of pulling this off. I'm just saying that it's highly unlikely. And if you're a good defensive coordinator, you just shut down Davante Adams. That's all you really have to do. I was amazed that Seattle couldn't cue in on that. I highly doubt San Francisco is not going to realize that when they go into the film room. Now, one of the biggest surprises of the NFL offseason so far, at least if you're not in the playoffs, has been the retirement of Luke Kuechly. And this was one of the reasons why I had to stop and reconsider releasing the podcast for my usual day, because this is a big name. This is one of the biggest names to be retiring in the past year, and we've had several of those retirements so far. I mean, besides Kuechly, you got to remember, we've had Andrew Luck and Rob Gronkowski in the last year that have all decided to hit the retirement button on their careers and have basically handed in their papers. And that's that. And it's strange. It's strange to me. I mean, Luke Kuechly, think about it. He's 28 years old. He definitely had 2 more years left on his contract and was definitely going to be up for an extension because he still was playing at a high level. He'd only missed a handful of games in his 8-year career. And here we are, he's retiring, and it sounds like it's mainly for health reasons. And you know what? Another thing with him, I just have to say, best of luck to him, because he is definitely one of the biggest NFL icons of the 2010s. I see him as the 2010s version of what Brian Urlacher was to me in the 2000s. Rough-nosed, always did his job the way he was meant to, a locker room leader, and was a dominant force on a defensive end. And he just did everything right, He did his job right, didn't make a stink about things, and that's the kind of person I always have been a fan of, I think, like, for example, cockiness has its place in life, but I don't like an over-cocky, high-ego type of mentality. Luke Kuechly, Brian Urlacher, those are people that I felt, they grounded themselves, they did their job, people respected them because they did their job right. I respect that, I really do. And that's why he's one of those icons. I wouldn't say role model, I would say Brian Urlacher was more of the role model type for me growing up. But, for a young kid, that's a role model type of player. And the NFL needs more players like Luke Kuechly, if you ask me, that you can say, hey, that's a hardworking individual. And it's a shame to see him go. But in the string of recent retirements that have hit the NFL, it's definitely seeming that health is, of course, becoming more of a concern. We obviously have had plenty of CTE research in recent years. Luke Kuechly, by the way, is one of the NFL's most frequently visited concussion protocol players. So I wouldn't be surprised if concussions were part of the reason why maybe some health officials were saying maybe it's time to hang up the cleats and consider the rest of your life. Again, he's only 28. If you want to put that in perspective, I'm 25. I am 3 years his junior on him. And I have not had that much abuse from football or physical exercise. And I worry about some of the stuff I got from high school. So if I'm considering that, you have to wonder what he might go through later down the line as he's retiring. He is definitely a player that is bound for Canton. He's going to get a Hall of Fame designation at some point because he just left that much of an impact. I mean, him and Thomas Davis in these past 5 to 7 years had some of the most dominant linebacking cores the NFL has seen in recent history. And he's going to be remembered for it. I do wish he would still play. Again, I understand, and, I wish the best. And for any of those players that are considering, maybe is retirement the right option, just think, obviously they'll think about it. But, the thing is, health should always come first. I love the NFL. I love football. I'm going to love the XFL and all these other leagues. But health should always come first for somebody. If it's best for you, and especially if you have a family, if it's best for your family, consider those options. Especially if you're in the NFL, you have plenty of money. If you've done it right, you have saved away so many millions of dollars at this point, especially for a player the caliber of Luke Kuechly. He is pretty much set for life unless something were to go drastically wrong or he makes some drastically terrible decisions. He is set for life. And this is the right decision, I think, for him again. So, best of luck to him. Glad that he's going to go out and have a legacy to where he will be Canton-bound someday. And I look forward to hearing him on the podium when he gets that chance. Now, speaking of Canton in the Hall of Fame, this week the NFL Hall of Fame announced its 13 candidates to enter the Centennial class for this year's inductees. And though there were some Bears that made the list, as well as Jimmy Johnson and Bill Cowher, I'm only going to touch on one in particular, and it's mainly because this person affected my life and the way I look at the sport, the way I look at filming and audio and just creative touch in its own, and that'd be Steve Sabol. Steve Sabol was the head of NFL Films for decades. He succeeded his father, Ed Sabol, at NFL Films, which at one point was Blair Production Studios, that would eventually become NFL Films, their first game being the 1962 NFL Championship with the Giants and the Packers. And Steve helped to create this image of the NFL that it looked like a war zone out there every game, and it was an elegance to the destruction that was the NFL and the way the game was played, and preserving some of those fantastic moments and making the game presented to people in a different light than it usually was just on TV was fantastic. It was mesmerizing to me, especially when NFL Network started playing more NFL Films-based content when it first originated. I really was captivated by all of the material that the Sabol family had preserved over the years. And a lot of those NFL Films videos, a lot of those films on, say, the 85 Bears or Bears history, or some of the Super Bowls, or other great moments in the NFL, or NFL Follies. One of my favorite segments that they used to make was NFL Follies, where it would be a season's worth of mishap plays or miscues, and they would time the comedic jokes perfectly. I wish I could describe it better, but if you ever look up NFL Follies on YouTube, just watch them. They're masterpieces of not only great filmmaking, but also of great NFL content. And him and his crew at NFL Films really inspired me just to say, you know what, sports videography or radio or whatever it was, that's the field I want to go into. I like creative aspects of this. I'd love to express myself in a way that I can show my fandom not just by words. I mean, obviously podcasts are this way, but you know, his inspiration of what him and his father had as a passion is what drives me for the love of the game. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. Him and Ed do not get enough credit for that. And in this segment, I gotta say, you know, wherever he is, and I know he has passed on, him and Ed have passed on at this point, but wherever they are, you know, thank you for your commitment to the sport that is football. And thank you to the commitment that is for the NFL and what the NFL is in my mind, especially through the players that play the game and for those special, unique, and mesmerizing moments that I will never forget. NFL Films has a lot of credit to that, and Steve Sabol gets plenty of credit for creating the majesty that was and still is NFL Films. So guys, that'll do it for this edition of Let's Talk About. Thank you, as always, for listening in and for following the show. I will recap the NFC and AFC playoff games once they have completed. That episode will probably come out around Wednesday, unless there are any setbacks, of course. Also, we're going to be touching on more XFL content here soon. The league is less than a month away, and if you do want to get ready for some XFL action, I do have a podcast on the rules that you should check out. It covers all 15 new rules of the game, and it allows you to understand how the game is going to be conducted and how I think of some of these rules and changes to the standard NFL game that they have put in place. But we'll also be covering some of the teams coming up as well. Might do that too while we have the extra week during the Pro Bowl. So be sure to look out for what I release during the Pro Bowl. Also, we will have a podcast kind of updating you on Aaron Ellis' status in Europe, along with his teammate and former teammate as well from St. Francis, Zach Moreno. He will be joining with him for a podcast talking about their experience in the early stages of them being in the Czech Republic, playing for the Ostrava Steelers. Other than that, guys, be sure to follow me on pretty much any social platform at this point. You can find me at Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by just searching up @ZK Podcast. That is ZKP ODCAST, and you'll be able to follow me on all those platforms. And then also check out my YouTube channel if you want to catch the podcast, but maybe not on, say, Spotify or any of those podcasting apps. Then be sure to just go on YouTube, look up Let's Talk About on YouTube. It should pop up and you'll get the latest episode and any of the update videos, by the way, that are released talking about what's new in the channel and what you might be expecting to come up. Until then, guys, thanks for listening in. Be sure to tune in to future episodes and check out some previous ones. And until next time, stay tuned.